And welcome, Hoosier fans, to another disappointed episode of the Assembly Call. As today, in the words of Andy Bottoms, Indiana, as he said, sometimes you get what you deserve. And tonight, Indiana got what it deserved, and that was a 68-63 loss to the Penn State Nittany Lions. I said before the game that, Indiana's talent and shooting ability should allow it to go into Penn State and win and kind of overwhelm Penn State, even with a B or a B minus effort. They should still be able to get out of there with a loss. And that may have been true, but a C effort, even a D effort, that wasn't going to get it done. And unfortunately, that's what Indiana brought to the arena tonight. And again, the Hoosiers lose 68-63. It's a big blow, especially with the Iowa game coming on Thursday and a game against a resurgent Michigan State team coming after that. Especially after that big win over Michigan, you hope the Hoosiers could build some momentum. But we all said before the game, this is a classic trap game, and Indiana fell into the trap, and they fall by 5 points to Penn State, who, give them credit, they came out from the tip and played harder. They wanted it more, and they executed down the stretch, and they absolutely deserve to win this game. But certainly, Indiana's lackluster play helped the Nittany Lions out. So, I am your host tonight, Jared Morris. I am here with Andy Bottoms and Ryan Phillips. Will DeWitt is out. He had his wisdom teeth removed, so we hope that Will is feeling better. I think he's going to send in his stat of the night for later. But we will start out this show, as we start out every episode, going around the horn. And I will start with the banner moment, and it's always hard to come up with banner moments after games like this where really nobody plays particularly well, and it's just kind of a poor effort all around. But I'm going to go with one that's kind of one of those backhanded compliments in a sense, because my banner moment is actually how Indiana utilized Thomas Bryant late in the game. They really started making a concerted effort to get it to Bryant late, when Penn State pushed it up by 3 points, 5 points, and when Indiana really got desperate for a bucket, they consistently went down to Bryant. Now, it was only the final few possessions, but it's nice to have a big guy like that when you need a bucket, you can go down low. And for the most part, Thomas did a good job. He would score or he would get fouled, and he did a nice job converting from the line, making 4 of 5 of his free throws. He was 3 of 4 from the field. But that's the problem, is he only got 4 field goal attempts. And that's why this is kind of a backhanded banner moment, because when you have a guy who's making 72% of his 2-point field goals, but he finished the 6th on the team in field goal attempts, that's not good. And I know that he was in foul trouble early, and so he didn't play much in the first half, and that's going to depress your shot attempts a little bit. But time after time, over the first 15 minutes of the second half, Thomas Bryant had position, and Indiana wouldn't get him the ball. In fact, Troy Williams a couple times had Thomas wide open and drove into Thomas's man. I don't know what he was thinking, but he could have very easily just fed Thomas. And so it's great to have a big guy that is that talented and that adept at scoring down low, and Indiana seemed to remember that the last 3 or 4 minutes. But unfortunately, they kind of forgot about it the first 36 minutes tonight, and that's a big reason why the Hoosiers don't win this game. Because, hey, maybe if you get Thomas 3 or 4 more field goal attempts, that can make up 5 or 6 points that you didn't have and the reason that you lost. So would have loved to see Indiana go into Thomas more. It was nice seeing them go to him late, but it shouldn't take that long in the game to get the big fellow the ball. So let's go around the horn. Ryan, we will start with you. Plenty to rant about. I'm curious to see what you'll choose.
It's just a general rant. I mean, these guys stepped on the floor tonight, and there was no passion. There was no excitement. There was no. They were just flat-footed all night, and I mean, and to me, that's what happens when you step on the floor just expecting to win, and expecting that your talent will just outshine the other team. And in the Big Ten, I don't care who you are. I don't care if you're Iowa. I don't care if you're Maryland. You can't do that, and I don't care who you're playing. I mean, you've seen teams play down to Rutgers this year, to Minnesota, and to Northwestern, and now you've seen it happen against Penn State. And Indiana deserved this loss. I mean, it's absolutely, they earned every bit of this loss, and the way they did it was by nobody stepping up and righting the ship at any point, and that's what your leaders are there for. And we've got both the leadership of the seniors, and then you've got the freshmen, sort of stepping up at times and filling those roles. And this is a different kind of freshman class where they're very mature and they're willing to take on, more of a responsibility than some others. But nobody did tonight. At no point did anybody say, hey, you know what? We're in trouble. I'm going to take over. And what you had was a bunch of guys just running in circles looking for somebody else to do something. And I just feel like that was the downfall. You just didn't have anybody who wanted to win this game. They may think they wanted to win it, but they didn't, and they weren't willing to do the things necessary to win it. And you've got guys on defense. Brandon Taylor's the only guy on Penn State who's gonna hurt you consistently, and somehow we kept leaving him open off of ball reversals and leaving him wide open from three. And it's not one guy, and I don't think we can sit here and call out one guy or two guys and say, well, if they play better, we win. It was just a general team-wide just malaise tonight. And we talked about it after the Michigan game that I thought this would be an ugly game, and I thought they'd win it sort of late like they did the Minnesota game. And I was wrong that they didn't right the ship. And maybe being on the road makes it harder to do that. I don't know. But the thing is that when there's a trap game coming up and everybody can see it's a trap game, you've got to do whatever it takes to make sure you don't fall into that trap. And Indiana fell head first, as I said on Twitter. Just fell right into it. It was a dogfight, and give Penn State and Pat Chambers credit. They took advantage, and they won the game.
Yep. Andy, your bottom's line on tonight's IU loss.
I'm not really sure where to start. I think, I just tweeted out a stat that I think is probably pretty telling. Penn State came into the game ranked 10th in the Big Ten in two-point defense, and IU, out of 47 field goal attempts, took 27 of them from three-point range. I really thought that was a turning point. They were in the bonus with probably 12 minutes to go in the game, and really just continued to settle for jumpers instead of pounding it inside. I know, Bryant was part of that. Your point about them doing that late in the game was a big one, and somebody just sent me something. Adam King just said it was, Bryant's offensive foul was one of the bigger moments of the game, kept him out of the game and his rhythm all night, and that really did take him out early. And whether IU's game plan was really to force feed him the ball inside, it certainly was late. I can only assume that it was early. But as you mentioned, guys were kind of turning the other way and not really getting them the ball. But it just was a game that against a team that wasn't good defensively, that they had in foul trouble. It just should have been a parade to the line the rest of the way, and they continued to shoot threes. And so I think that gave Penn State some, I guess not momentum in that case, but they just settled. And I thought that was telling in the second half, and I thought the first half, the way they started the game, as you mentioned, Penn State really came out with great energy, and they just, IU never did anything to take that away. They just only allowed them to build on it and make it more and more with every turnover, with every kind of rebound, tap back, and second chance points and things like that. They just allowed Penn State to continue growing their confidence for a team that really has no reason to have any based on how they had played recently. And I just thought, Penn State really took it to IU early, and as opposed to what they did to kind of rebound against Michigan the other night, they really never were able to get the momentum back.
Yep. All right. Well, we welcome all of you who are watching live. We welcome everybody who's listening on the podcast. And, of course, we welcome all of you who are listening on WXVW 1450, the Sports Buzz in Louisville. And I do want to offer this reminder to get on our email list. We are now almost to 1,600 people on our email list. There are two ways to do so. You can go to assemblycall.com/subscribe. You can also text Indiana, Indiana, INDIANA to 44144. That will also get you on the list. And, of course, getting on the list will get you our post-game emails. We send them the morning after every game. It includes my thoughts on the game, Andy's analysis, Will's stat of the game. And so you definitely want to get on that because only our email subscribers get that content. So, again, assemblycall.com/subscribe or text Indiana to 44144. All right, well, I am Jared Morris. This is the Assembly Call, and we are breaking down Indiana's really, really disappointing 68-63 loss to Penn State. And, I guess the only real silver lining on a night like tonight is that if you rewind and we think back to before the Minnesota game, we looked at this 3-game stretch coming up, Minnesota at Michigan and at Penn State, saying Indiana's got to go 2-3 over this stretch at a minimum. You go 2-3, then you can feel pretty good. You're at 9-2 and you're ready for that stretch run. There's going to be a lot of tough games, but you got to like your chances to split at home. Maybe you steal one on the road. The problem is we all thought Indiana would beat Minnesota, and if there was going to be a loss in these 3 games, it would come at Michigan. And that's what kind of changes the context here, is that Indiana played so well in that Michigan game, and you've got this opportunity now to be sitting at 10-1 with that Iowa game coming, and to drop a game like this, that's what makes it disappointing. So I'm seeing some tweets go that now Indiana's out of the running for the Big Ten and all this stuff, and I don't think we need to go quite with that kind of sky is falling hyperbole. This team is still in a really good position to do what it wants to do, but man, it could be in better position. And this is a Penn State team that Indiana should have beaten if they just come ready to play, Ryan. And like you said, they didn't tonight. And I think one guy, that we have been extremely that we've praised him a lot, been very laudatory of this guy all Big Ten season because he's deserved it, is Yogi Ferrell. But I think tonight, he deserves a little bit of criticism. Yogi did finish with 13 points. He had 5 assists, 3 boards, had 5 turnovers, and frankly, I felt like the team followed Yogi's lead early. And Yogi had 4 of those turnovers, I think, in the first 10 minutes of the game. And it was the 3rd straight game where Indiana starters have gotten off to a really bad start. Penn State led at the under 16-minute timeout of the first half, 11-5. Indiana had 7 turnovers in the first 7 minutes of the game. And Andy, I want to ask you about this because now we've seen it 3 straight games. Minnesota jumped out to a big lead against Indiana. Michigan did too. Now Indiana was able to rebound. But when you look at that start, 11-5, over the next 36 minutes, Indiana actually outscored Penn State by a point. So it came back to that start, and it finally bit Indiana in the butt. And I'm just wondering, do you think it's time to shuffle something up with the starting lineup? You see it once, okay, maybe it's just an aberration, but that's 3 straight times now the starters have really come out and played poorly, and you can't keep digging yourself an early hole, especially on the road, and expect to win too many games. What do you think, both about that and about Yogi's play tonight?
Yeah, I mean, I guess I'll talk about Yogi first. I thought it was interesting in the second half. I guess this ties both those points together a little bit. At the beginning of the second half where, Bryant didn't start, which I presume was more about foul trouble than anything else. But Troy also didn't start. And I thought, in that case, it really gave those first couple of possessions, Yogi was really the guy handling the ball. One of the things that, I mentioned, I think we all mentioned, any IU fan probably mentioned at some point during the first half was, this notion of Troy initiating the offense and what we've seen from that, even our comments after the Michigan game about how much better he is off the ball, and that just didn't translate to this game, particularly in the first half. And so it seemed like with him not on the floor early on, Yogi really took charge, had a couple baskets early, drew some fouls, and was really aggressive, early on. And then it felt like they got away from that. I know he missed a layup. He was kind of expecting some contact, tried to finish with his right hand on the left side, but did get to the line, missed the front end of a 1-and-1, which was, not necessarily customary for the way he shoots free throws. But even on the last play of the game, which feels like nothing, but dished it to Hartman in the same spot where he just missed one. And at that point, it really didn't matter if the shot went in; it wasn't gonna change the course of the game. But it was odd. It seemed like he was really aggressive at the beginning of the second half, and not as aggressive the rest of the game. The turnovers early. I think your point about other guys taking a cue from him. He and Troy just didn't seem to be on the same page when he got in the lane. So yeah, definitely kind of a weird night. At the same time, like the shots he took weren't necessarily bad. Didn't really go down, but weren't necessarily shots that he hasn't been making this year. So I guess I'm less hung up on the fact that he was 3 for 12 than I am maybe the turnover numbers and some of the other plays in the second half. As far as the starting lineup, I think a lot of that centers around Troy, quite honestly. You could certainly make the argument after tonight about Colin Hartman. This was certainly one of his worst games that he's had over the course of the season, and has struggled a bit lately, but I think has still shown to do some good things on the court. So it will be interesting because Troy did not play a lot in crunch time. He didn't play in the beginning of the second half, and I don't know that anybody who watched other parts of the game necessarily was disagreeing with that decision, but I'll be curious to see whether that is something that does, kind of translate into a change in the starting lineup. Although, to be honest, I think OG is the guy most people really want to see. He didn't score tonight. I thought he played good defense at times on Brandon Taylor and kind of like his energy off the bench. I thought Juwan Morgan played well. Don't know if he's ready to step into a starting role, and if it's not one of those guys, I'm not really sure who it would be. I can't see starting both Bielfeldt and Bryant. So I guess the question becomes if you want to pull the trigger and make a move to shake things up from a starting lineup standpoint. One, I don't think it'll happen because it's one game they've lost in this sequence, even though the starts of games haven't been good. And two, I guess I'm not sure who the obvious choice to go with even is at that point.
Yeah, Ron, what do you think about that? I mean, do you think that's something that we should be thinking about with the starters? Is that something that you think will just correct itself? Or, is this where, you've got some bench guys that are playing well, keep them in those roles? What do you think?
Well, first, I want to talk about Yogi, and I just think that he was deferring too much, especially late in the game. I mean, you saw him, dribbling a lot, and he'd dribble and just go into the weave, and give it up immediately when I think he really could have started to work in that high key area and just getting some easy pull-up jumpers. I mean, we know he can make that. It's not his bread and butter. It's not what we've seen. He's usually, especially this year, he's usually drive or he's hitting a three or he's passing it up. And I just really think that he needed to attack that sort of, because they were overplaying him as a three-point shooter, which, I mean, at this point, if you can get a little bit of help on the back end against him driving, you should overplay the three. But he's usually so crafty that it's just hard to do that. And I got to credit Penn State. I thought that for a team that's not very good defensively, I thought they played excellent perimeter defense tonight for the most part. They left Zeisloft open a few times, and he got some clean looks, one of which he missed, which, again, Nick's got to knock every clean look he gets down because he is not going to see many of them. But, I think that Yogi just had an off night. And the thing is that it happens. Even your best player is going to have an off night. Other people have to step up. And as I said in my opening statement, nobody else stepped up. And nobody else, looked like they were even curious or wanting to see what stepping up would look like. I mean, that had nothing to do with even like, no, well, we'll let him do it. It was just they just okay, you take the ball. No, I don't want it. And so it was disappointing. As far as the starting lineup goes, I mean, other than Troy, who do you take out? I don't think it's I think that for the most part, all the other guys in the starting lineup have played pretty well this year, and pretty consistently. Hartman had a terrible game tonight, and I was all over him on Twitter. I just thought he was just, I don't know if he's sick or what, but he was just sort of not playing the way he plays. Now, again, over the last 2 years, we've seen him be a guy who, if he has an off game, usually comes back and plays pretty well. The water finds its level with him almost always. So I'm not really that worried about that. Again, guys have off nights, especially on the road. It happens. The problem tonight was that everybody seemed to have an off night all at once, and that's a really bad recipe when you're on the road in the Big Ten. The only guy I could see would be maybe subbing Troy out, moving Hartman into his slot, and adding another guard in Zeisloft. I mean, that's the only thing I can think of. But again, I don't know if that's a great fit, and so
Yeah, but look, neither of these horrible starts. A lot of which are
you're right.
Driven.
No, but you're right. But see, I'm just not sure we're subbing that for something better. I mean, I would agree.
Well, Zeisloft doesn't turn it over.
It's true, but at the same time, he also is a bit redundant with the other two guards on the floor. I mean, do you really want to stick with that 3-guard lineup with two guys who sort of are going to be taking up spots from each other, and then is Hartman really your 4? I mean, it's just,
well, he played center last year.
It's true, he did.
It also leaves you with 0 guards on the bench if you do that too. So you've got that going.
Again, no, but it's one of those things where it's an interesting conversation to have, but at the same time, I mean, is one really a vast improvement over the other? Maybe it is, but I mean, I don't have enough evidence to say, no, we should definitely do this and switch this up. I think Anunoby and Morgan need to stay on the bench because I like what they bring coming in, as Andy has said. I like their energy. I like that it's a burst of energy. It's 5-minute runs of lots of energy. Go to the bench, talk to the coaches, learn what you need to do better, come back out, give me another 5 minutes, whatever that is. So I appreciate that. I think that you add another level of sort of like pressure on them when they're a starter, even though we know that doesn't really matter. It matters how much you play within the game. But, you know, in your mind, it's a big deal to supplant a starter, especially one who's a veteran. So, yeah, I'm not really sure what we should do in that aspect. I'm not really one for making big cosmetic changes when you are 9-2 in the Big Ten.
Yeah, well, I'm sure it'll be a debate. It has been a debate, and again, with another slow start, I'm sure it'll pick up. Real quick, Will did email us his stat of the night. Couple of interesting numbers here. The first one's pretty depressing. Well, actually, all the numbers are depressing, but tonight's effective field goal, or the field goal percentage for Indiana was 36.2%. The previous low for the season was 41.3% at Minnesota. So that was another poor performance, but Indiana found a way to win that one, and that's the big difference. Is I thought Yogi really made a lot of big plays at the end of that Minnesota game, and like you said, Ryan, Andy, he was really deferring a lot tonight. The other big number for me that really stood out is the offensive rebounding number. And, Indiana has been able to compensate for its turnovers a lot this year by getting extra possessions with offensive rebounds. They're one of the top 15 offensive rebounding teams in the country, and they usually get 38-39% of their misses. Tonight, they had an offensive rebounding percentage of only 26.7%. And offensive rebounds are focus, their awareness, and their effort. So it's no coincidence that, Ryan, it goes along with what you said. The guys just really didn't seem to come out with that will to win that you need, especially on the road, and that's going to show up in statistics like that, offensive rebounding percentage. So some good numbers there from Will. Again, all the numbers spell defeat. Penn State scores 1.07 points per possession. Indiana 0.97 points per possession. And, Penn State only turns it over on 11% of their possessions. Indiana turns it over on 23.3% of their possessions. So everywhere you look, the number is just not very good. Andy, any thoughts on the offensive rebounding and how that contributed to Indiana's poor play tonight?
Well, it was, I'm just looking again at stats coming into the game. Penn State in conference play was 10th in offensive rebounding percentages, and they actually had more offensive rebounds than IU did tonight. I don't know what their percentage was, but they had 10, at least in the box score I'm looking at, and a few in just key spots where they would take some just god-awful shots and manage to come up with it. And by the same token, they were 12th defensively in terms of limiting offensive rebounds. And as you said, that had been an area where really, if you looked at it, before the game, it felt like a great area of advantage for IU, given how they had played and how Penn State had played. So I did learn something I did get out of listening to the entire broadcast without ripping my ears off, was that they had worked a lot on back taps, which they definitely did a lot on the offensive end for Penn State. So, perhaps that was there. If there's anything I took away from the announcing, besides a true disdain for Sean Morris, it was that they had worked on back taps, which did appear to help during the game.
Yeah, it sure did seem like the bad announcing monster got out from under the bed tonight.
That was look, Josh Lewin is actually the play-by-play guy for the Chargers, and he's really good at football. He is actually a very good football announcer. Oh my God, he was horrible at basketball, and you throw in Sean Morris there. The television is lucky.
Everything about the night sucked is pretty much what I think we're getting down to.
The television is lucky it's not sitting in a friggin' fountain outside, okay? Yeah. I was so ready to just, go into a room and listen to it on the radio. It was so bad. Is the Big Ten Network, have they fallen that far that they got to go with those two guys on a broadcast?
But what's better than Josh Lewin and Sean Morris breaking down Shake It Like a Polaroid Picture? It was the whitest moment of the last 10 years of my life.
Honestly, it set white people who like hip hop back at least 15 years. Way more than the Oscars not nominating Straight Outta Compton. That was bad. This put it way, way back.
Yeah. And by the way, this is just a short aside because talking about the game is a little bit too painful. Galen Clavio actually tweeted, he runs the sports media program at IU, said that he hoped that one of his students was breaking down this game for class, or said that he should have had one of his students break it down for class. And I'm thinking, should have had one of your students announce the game. I think it would have ended up being much better. So, yeah, the broadcast wasn't good, and frankly, the performance by the Hoosiers, even worse.
Quite frankly, they matched each other, which was nice. I thought
they did.
It was like a nice pairing of a wine with a steak or something like that. It really went well together. Made me hate my life even more.
Yeah. The other thing that's frustrating about this game is I think what we've seen from Indiana recently and what's really been encouraging about this team is how much they've seemed to be on the same page with their coach. You listen to what Tom Crean talks about as the keys before the game, and for the most part, Indiana's done a nice job of executing them, but tonight they really didn't, because when you look at what Tom Crean talked about before the game, the guy he was the most concerned with was Brandon Taylor, as he should be. I mean, Brandon Taylor is Penn State's best player. And Crean even compared him to Nigel Hayes. He said he's like their Nigel Hayes. We've got to be locked into their personnel, know when we're switching, and limit touches to Taylor. And Indiana did not do that. He got 20 shots. He had 24 points, had 6 boards. I thought the one stretch when Indiana played good defense on him was at the start of the second half. When OG Anunoby started in the second half, he was on Taylor. And Taylor took 3 or 4 shots in the first 5 minutes of the second half, but he missed them all. And part of that was because OG made it a little bit more difficult for him to get the ball, had a hand up in his face. Now, the defense wasn't quite as good, for the rest of the time, but I thought that's what Indiana needed to do, and they kind of got away from it. And there wasn't as much of OG guarding Taylor the rest of the second half, but they certainly didn't limit the touches. Crean also, said don't let the game slow down, and the first 10 minutes, it almost felt like Indiana was doing too much, playing too fast, and that's where all the turnovers came. But then it's like they compensated, and they weren't turning the ball over much because they only had 5 turnovers over the last 30 minutes of the game, but the game got really slow and was played much more at Penn State's pace, and so Indiana really not able to do that. So it wasn't, again, on a night like tonight, you're not doing many things well, but I just thought that, what it seemed that Tom Crean wanted them to do, they weren't doing, and Indiana wasn't able to adjust in the game as they've been able to do some other times. I mean, Andy, as you look at it from a game plan standpoint, any of that, is there anything that, outside of just the guys executing better, anything specifically that you would have liked to see done that you think maybe could have helped, even when you don't have your A game or your B game, just find a way to pull out a win?
I mean, I keep looking at these stats about how many threes they shot. Somebody, I think Justin Albers, tweeted out the stats in the second half: 15 of 23 shots from 3-point range. Zach Osterman, Indiana entered the bonus, 12:42 left in the second half. From that point, shot 10 3-pointers, 8 free throws by my count. Have IU 2 of 10 from behind the arc, 8 of 10 at the free throw line. I mean, I just so that's not really a game plan thing. I mean, that's really more of an in-game thing. I did think, one of the things defensively, at least they did, we saw a little bit more zone. We definitely saw some of that against Minnesota when we were there last weekend, and all talked about after the fact that we were surprised we didn't see more of it in the second half, given how easily Minnesota was scoring. And so, IU went to that at times tonight, and I think with certainly more mixed results, I can see why you would do it, because Penn State had come into the game shooting incredibly poorly from there during the game, or during the season so far. But they definitely got some open looks. Leaving Taylor there in the corner late was a big one, and I can kind of see from that standpoint of, I'm going to make this team beat me from the outside. But they got a few to go down early, and I thought at times it kind of limited the aggressiveness of IU. It really allowed Penn State to pass the ball around the perimeter and not really get the pace of the game going the way that they wanted it. And there was another time I thought Pat Chambers did a really good job. I mean, he took a timeout basically because Penn State was kind of getting into a track meet with IU, which is not where they wanted to be. And I thought a good tactical move on his part to really slow everybody down and kind of reset them. And eventually the game was played right where he wanted it to be, regardless of the fact that IU did have some chances there toward the end. So I thought the zone was not a bad idea for IU, but it actually in some ways I think played into what Penn State wanted to do in terms of being able to slow the game down. And other than that, I think, I have to assume the plan early was to try to feed it into Bryant, but getting those 2 fouls early, Bielfeldt getting the 2 fouls early, and then, Bryant picking up that third when he came back in the game late in the first half, which I thought, if you want to talk coaching decisions, was one I didn't really understand at that point. Penn State's not a team that's going to dump the ball into the post. I think that was known coming in, so I think you could have gotten away with playing a front line of Morgan, Anunoby, and Hartman for a period of time there, or even with Troy in at times. And so I thought then, again, I'm assuming that's why Brian didn't start the second half. Thought that really just kind of further taking him out of the game. Didn't feel like he could really challenge shots very much at the rim, and really got things going there. So we want to talk coaching things, I guess that's the one that I probably question the most.
Ryan, what do you think?
I wanted to talk about the three-point shot. I mean, I know that people nationally think that's what IU does because they shoot such a high percentage. They shoot it. When IU is at its best, the team is attacking the rim, and three-pointers come as an overplay by the defense. You get wide-open looks. Firing three-pointers is not what Indiana does well, and occasionally you might get lucky and hit a couple and in a row and take a lead. But if you look at the way they beat Michigan, that was working inside out, that was going through the paint, and what happened was then Michigan started to sag down, and then they had wide open looks from the perimeter. Tonight, watching them just fire threes and just not being able to penetrate and not being able to get Penn State on its heels, it was maddening because they have to know that's what they do well, and they have to know that attacking and going forward and not trying to just fire the ball around the perimeter is what they do well, and so it was frustrating, and I think that Troy Williams shot a couple of threes where he was completely off his back foot, like fading away, just whatever. And to Green's credit, both times he yanked him out of the game. Another time he left Brandon Taylor wide open, as we said late in the game on that 2-3 zone in the corner. He left him wide open in the corner. It's the one guy that I'm worried about shooting a three on Penn State in that situation is Brandon Taylor, and Troy sagged in too far, left him wide open, he buried a three. And that was really, at that point, you were thinking, okay, this game, I mean, if you can't guard their best player, who they want to get the ball to, and who wants to shoot it as soon as he gets it, if he has a clean look, if you can't guard that guy, you're not going to win this game. And so, to his credit, he pulled Troy out. I don't even think Troy may have come in the rest of the way, but he didn't play very much. Mm-hmm. And so it's I think it was just a night where nobody was doing what they were supposed to do. Nobody stepped up. Nobody was playing the way they were, and it didn't even matter who he ran in or out. Everybody, I mean, look, I love Max Bielfeldt. I think he's done a great job, and I'm fine with him shooting threes. There were a couple there that it was, I don't care if there's 10 feet between you and your defender. Why are you shooting that shot flat-footed from 20 feet away? That's not your game. Look, if you get the ball in a ball reversal and you got nobody around you and you're in rhythm, okay, yeah, take a three. But just standing there firing is that's not what you do, and that's not what Indiana does well. So it's frustrating, and it's one of those things where it's not like the game plan was to go do that. These guys were clearly just kind of sleepwalking through the game, not doing what they were supposed to, and not executing. And at that point, there's really not a whole lot you can do other than just do a parade of substitutions, which I thought Green did at one point. So, I mean, I just think that some nights nobody has it, and tonight was one of those nights. I don't think anybody had it.
Yeah, Bielfeldt, to your point, he took 6 shots, 5 of them were three-pointers. So Max Bielfeldt playing like Rod Wilmot, probably not a great recipe for success for Indiana. All right, I want to ask you guys an important question. Brian, in our chat, brought up a really interesting point, and I want to use this as a jumping-off point to our next discussion. We'll get to that here in a second. I do want to remind everybody who is listening, number one, I want to thank you for listening and for supporting the Assembly Call because we appreciate it. And if you do want to take the next step in supporting the show, as so many folks have, you can go to assemblycall.com/support. There are several different ways there that you can become a patron of the Assembly Call, and they all help us out very much as we look to expand our coverage and continue to provide you with great IU basketball coverage and analysis, provide our interns with additional opportunities. So again, you can go to assemblycall.com/support. All of those opportunities are right there, and we greatly appreciate all of the help and support that you give us. All right, well, I am Jared Morris. This is the Assembly Call. I'm here with Andy Bottoms and Ryan Phillips. We are breaking down Indiana's 68-63 loss to Penn State tonight. This one's going to sting. This is a game that Indiana should have won. They didn't come out ready to play, and they lost. So here's an interesting point from Brian, who says, short of the 8 minutes of incredible play at Michigan, the last 4 games have been lackluster. At Wisconsin, home versus Minnesota, at Penn State, and at times versus Michigan. And when you look at it, that's certainly true. And it's kind of like right now, I kind of spelled out the way to look at it with the glass half full earlier, to where, hey, 3 games ago we said we need to go 2-3 in this stretch. We did it. We're able to get a nice road win against Michigan. And yet, when you look at it from the other perspective, you lose a winnable game at Wisconsin when you turn it over 19 times. You really play poorly for about 38 minutes against Minnesota before making the plays late. You don't even start out well against Michigan, but then just absolutely blitz them with what is undoubtedly that was beautiful basketball, and that was Indiana playing its best. And then tonight you come out and you don't really play very well. And so I'm curious to just take the temperature, see how you guys feel, because frankly, coming into tonight, I was telling everybody who would listen, yes, I recognize that there's trap game potential, but I was feeling pretty good about it. I was starting to trust this team that they would come out and take care of business. Clearly, that trust was misplaced because of the performance tonight. And I guess I'm struggling a little bit with how I feel about the team moving forward now. This has shaken my confidence just a tad. So, Andy, let me go to you first and then to Ryan. Where do you sit right now? Do you take more of the glass half full, more of the kind of the glass is half empty? How are you feeling right now, given everything that's happened over the past 4 games?
Well, to be honest, since you're the most optimistic of all of us, it's a bit jarring to hear you say that you're shaking. But, it's funny. In this college basketball season, I mentioned it a couple times where I said we should really give IU credit for not having one of these kind of toe stub, inexplicable losses that so many other teams have had over the course of things. So in that regard, I almost am inclined to chalk it up to this is a weird college basketball season and these things are going to happen. It's a place IU has traditionally not played well for whatever reason. And I don't know that while it seemed unlikely they would lose, I wouldn't categorize myself as stunned either. It just seemed like there were a lot of things lining up right for a potential upset here. That being said, it was an imminently winnable game despite how bad they had played, which I think speaks to maybe how bad Penn State is and how frustrating of a loss it is. So, I do think there's some truth to that frustration, but I also am not convinced that, I guess I look at it in the sense that, these next few games are going to teach us as much about this team as anything. So I think that's where we're going to tip the scales one way or the other. They got 3 of the next 4 at home, but they're also really tough games against 3 of the better teams in the league. So, and really the entire stretch run as a whole is going to help us figure out whether we should have been worried or not at this point. I'm inclined to say at this point it's a slip up that could have happened earlier in the season at a different point, and they've managed to avoid. But I will say, when you kind of put it in that context, like it kind of felt like it was coming. One of these, from a luck perspective or whatever you want to attribute it to in these close games where they've struggled against teams that it feels like they should beat. It kind of felt like at some point one's going to jump up and bite you, and I think we're all hoping that this wouldn't be it. But I guess I'm not as, while it's certainly frustrating, and the way that they lost the game is disheartening in a lot of ways, just from an effort standpoint and kind of the things that we've touched on earlier. I guess I tend to think that this isn't necessarily what this team is going to be toward the end of the season, but if you ask me that question in a week or a week and a half, I may have a different answer. But for now, I guess I'm taking the glass half full approach and saying this is just kind of a blip. A lot of things didn't go their way, and they just were unable to dig themselves out from the hole that they dug too early.
Yeah, and kind of a concerning quote. Jeff Rabjohn's quoting Tom Crean saying, "I've praised our leadership for 2+ months, and rightfully so. I'm not feeling that way tonight." And this is a loss when you have a loss like this on the road that comes back to your leaders. These are the games where leaders have to step up and pull you through, and guys like Yogi and Max and some of the leaders on the team didn't really play well enough for that to happen. Ryan, what do you think? Does this shake your confidence in this team at all? How are you feeling?
I just think over the last couple weeks is a team that's playing to its competition, and against Minnesota they played to the competition and pulled it out. Against Michigan, they sort of played at that level for a couple minutes, as you said, had just an insane run there where they played perfect basketball essentially, and then the rest of the game was pretty much even. People can get upset about that, but having a lull in a season isn't really, especially grinded out season like the Big Ten, isn't really that shocking. I mean, the Big Ten's bad teams are still really good compared to the rest of the world, the college basketball world. And so I think that you're seeing a team that is, trying to find its way. It's not, I mean, look at it. Indiana was 19-4 coming into this game and 9-1 in the Big Ten and ranked 22nd. Okay, people are not giving this team any credit whatsoever for how they've played this year, which is fine because they haven't proven themselves yet. I mean, I agree with that. I've been saying that all year. I thought the Michigan game was really a step up in, how they've played, and I thought they deserve some credit for that. But at the same time, this is a team that people are doubting and needs to sort of take that and play with a chip on its shoulder. I mean, if you are better than what people are saying you are, show them. And tonight they didn't show them. And that's disappointing because of how well they played against Michigan. You felt like this team was saying, like, hey, yeah, you know what, F you, we're pretty good. And then to come out tonight, now people are going to question that Michigan win and just say, oh, well, Michigan just didn't play well. And so it drags them back down. And it's frustrating because you've seen how hard these kids have worked to get better on both ends of the floor. And they really just shot themselves in the foot tonight. Now, here's the thing about this. As Andy said, this has been a crazy college basketball season. I don't think any of the three of us would be shocked if they blew Iowa's doors off on Thursday night. Like, just came out on fire and just blew them away. And not saying that it is, has anything to do with Iowa. I just think that it's at Assembly Hall. It's going to be a great atmosphere regardless. And, this team, when it gets on fire, can beat anybody. We know that. I would not be shocked if they did to Iowa what they did to Maryland last year when Maryland visited Assembly Hall. Now, does that mean that they're all of a sudden a top 5 team? No, it's just the way things go. And sometimes, as Andy said, you have a bad loss, nobody plays well. It seems like Indiana, for as long as I've followed the team, over a decade now, more than a decade, has had one of these losses every year. It just sort of happens. That's the Big Ten. But it doesn't mean it's any less disappointing when it happens. So, I'm pretty sanguine about this loss. I mean, we knew one of these was coming, but at the same time, it's not going to be about this loss. It's going to be about how they react Thursday night when they have a real team to play and a real chance to make a statement. Because we thought they made a statement against Michigan. That's gone now. That is erased. Any goodwill they engendered with that win is gone. And now they got to start proving themselves all over again. So it's on them to figure it out.
Yeah, it's funny that you mentioned that about Iowa. I tweeted out a couple days ago, and I even prefaced it by saying this is going to sound really weird, but a part of me is more confident in Indiana beating Iowa at home than beating Penn State on the road, which, again, is just part of, like we've said. I mean, Indiana does always seem to have one of these toe stub losses. And, overcoming a slow start against Rutgers and fighting through to beat Nebraska and, struggling against Minnesota before winning, you kind of felt like maybe they were past that. They clearly proved that they aren't tonight. But, okay, we're 9-2. We move forward. Huge opportunity against Iowa on Thursday, and we're going to get Andy's thoughts on that here in just a second. Real quick, I guess, kind of final thoughts from you guys on this game in particular, if there's any individuals that we want to go over. I mean, one guy, and I'll kick it to you, Andy, is Robert Johnson, who – I thought for most of the night actually did a lot of good things. He only had 6 points, and only was able to get up 5 shots, but had 5 assists. I thought he threw 2 of the most beautiful bounce passes on fast breaks that you'll see, where there wasn't a perfect opening to the guy who was streaking down the right side, but he threw a perfect bounce pass to get it to him. One was converted into a layup. The other one, Yogi got fouled and scored. And so those little things, we're starting to see Robert Johnson do a lot more effectively. He only had 2 turnovers, and none of them were just the real bad bonehead Robert Johnson turnovers that we've seen. So I won't say that he played well because I don't think anybody played well, but I thought he was decent. Andy, any thoughts on Robert Johnson?
Yeah, it was interesting. The one thing that I would agree with anything you said. I mean, he had a pretty good all-around night. Didn't score a ton of points. Had to made a 3 early. And then really didn't score too much after that. But I thought during the one stretch toward the end of the game, they were down 5 points, and he had that really nice take to the basket, finished at the rim, and then the very next possession came and set up Zeisloff for a 3. And I'm not sure. And then there was it might have been a media timeout or something after that, and I'm not sure that he touched the ball very much more from that point forward in the game. And I thought he had done a good job of creating, may have had a mismatch there defensively that he was able to, kind of turn the corner on. And I thought it was unfortunate to some extent that he didn't touch the ball a little bit more down the stretch, not necessarily to shoot, but just to be able to set up other guys. So I thought he played relatively well. We didn't really talk a ton about Zeisloft, who really came in. A lot of people, mentioned the Minnesota game, the way he came in and shot threes. He ended up with 14 points and only 1 rebound, but no turnovers. And I thought he played really well off the bench. So he was another guy who, if anybody was the one to step up, as we kind of lamented nobody really doing that, I thought he was, maybe one guy who somewhat unexpectedly, I guess, stepped up. And Juwan Morgan is the other guy I'd mentioned. I'll be curious to see when I do the stats later how much he played in the second half. I know somebody asked that question on Twitter, and somebody said he had played, but it wasn't much. And I thought he did a really good job in the first half, got to the line a few times, and I thought he did a really good job, continues to be good defensively, and I think that's something that obviously we know this team needs, and did a nice job on the boards as well. So I'll be curious to see if my kind of thought in my head of how much he played in the second half is really something that is not true, and he really played more than I realized, or if it was a case where maybe missed opportunities to get him in the game based on how other guys are playing. But those are at least a few of the guys that stood out to me that we maybe haven't talked a lot about so far.
Hey, Andy, breaking news here from the chat from Ryan. Apparently it's redundant talking about players and saying they weren't great, they didn't really play well. So we're going to move on from talking about the Penn State game and breaking down any individual performances. Hey, he's right, I mean, can't argue with him, he's right. And actually, Brian F. in our chat just posted something that'll make everybody feel better, and frankly, it should have been the banner moment. But the 2013 Michigan team lost at Penn State. That team made the Final Four. So there you go. If you're looking for a silver lining, there is an odd, awkward silver lining. But the true silver lining for this game is that Thursday, Iowa comes into Bloomington, which gives Indiana a chance to erase the bad taste that is in all of our mouths from this game with a big win over a top 5 team that would finally put a real stamp on Indiana's NCAA tournament resume. And so, I don't know that we need to do the full breakdown of Iowa, Andy, because I think most IU fans by this point are probably pretty familiar with what Iowa's doing and probably seen them play because they're playing so well. But here's the big question I think everybody's going to be wondering is how does Indiana defend Jared Uthoff? And maybe the answer is you don't really, because he's such a good player, such a versatile player, that he's going to get his. But what do you do with him? The obvious answer seems to be stick OG Anunoby on him, because that is just starting to be our answer for what we do with every team's opposing best player. But what do you think? What does Indiana do with Uthoff, and what kind of challenge does Iowa present on Thursday?
Yeah, I think it'll be interesting. I mean, it's certainly a question that makes you think back to that starting lineup question earlier, because I think if you make the assumption that the starting lineup's not going to change, I feel like you probably have to go Hartman on him. At that point, I don't know that anyone would be advocating putting Troy Williams on him early on. I think Hartman, at least a guy who defensively, positioning and all those kinds of things, has done well, as we've talked about quite a bit on the show. So that would be my guess initially, assuming the starting lineup doesn't change. But I think he'll see certainly some of Anunoby. I would assume he'll see some Juwan Morgan as well. I think both those guys have defended really well, and I just thought, as guys tried to do different spin moves and things like that, that was one thing I was really impressed with Morgan by in particular, that he seemed to, whether that was from watching film of the guys that he was going to guard or whatever, just seemed to know where they wanted to go with the ball and recognize that really quickly. So I think they're going to have to throw a little bit of everybody at him to try to slow him up, and we'll see how that works out. But, I was significantly better than I thought they would be this year. That's probably an understatement and maybe a view shared by many, but I really just thought they'd miss, Aaron White and Olaseni more than they have. But, they play 2 point guards a lot of the time with Mike Gesell and Anthony Clements. So that gives them, a solid foundation. They don't turn the ball over. Their turnover percentage is 5th in the country, at least as it stands right now. So only turned over 14% of their possessions. So they're not going to beat themselves, which I think many of us have a new fondness for after watching this game tonight, in terms of how they've played. And Peter Jock has really stepped into a bigger role and played well. So I think they present, a lot of defensive challenges for IU. And even when you go to the bench, Dom Ewell has come off the bench. He's shooting almost 48% from three. He's only taken 46 of them, but gives them a good lift. And they're just anybody they're bringing in is presenting something, and they're not seeing a lot of drop off when they do have to go to the bench. So. Been really impressed with them. They're going to throw different defenses at you. I know the Purdue game, the first Purdue game, they really pressed a lot, and that really turned that game, given Purdue's struggles in the backcourt. So with IU's turnover percentage, that can and should frighten everyone. They're second in conference play in defensive turnover percentage. So that will probably keep most IU fans from sleeping over the next 4 to 5 days. As it probably should, and they've just been really good on both ends of the floor. I mean, they're third in defensive efficiency in the conference and second in offensive. So there's not really a huge weakness. If you do want to look at one, they've given up some offensive rebounds in conference play. So hopefully IU can get back to how they looked before tonight. But other than that, they're in the top three in most other defensive categories and have really been effective. So. It will be no small challenge, but at the same time, I tend to see it a little bit like you in that while it's maybe a little bit difficult to get up for an 8 o'clock start at Penn State on a Saturday night, I don't think those same kinds of concerns, whether we like it or not, it's disappointing to say that given how this team has played that it might be hard to get up for a game, but I think the one on Thursday night is not going to fall in that category.
Ryan, do you have any thoughts on what you do with Utah?
Pray. I think that what you've got to do is just run guys at him. I know he's a great 3-point shooter, but I think you've got to force him to shoot jumpers. Whatever you do, just don't let him get into a driving rhythm, because that's going to get you in foul trouble. That's going to get guys like Bryant and Bielfeldt in the post in foul trouble trying to help out. I really think that if you can contain him, let him score 20. I mean, if he's gonna do that. He's gonna score his 15, his 20. You can't let him go off, and you've got to defend everybody else. You can't let worrying about Utah really screw your defense up for how you're going to attack the other guys. Because that's where Iowa beats you is with their depth. I mean, it seems like, and I think it's a lot like Maryland too. I mean, Maryland is so deep. The problem isn't Melo, Trimble, and Diamond Stone. The problem is that those guys play well and the other guys bury you. So I think that the key for Indiana is not getting so wrapped up in stopping Utah that they, leave other guys open. I think we will see some zone, and I think that the gamble there is that you can out-rebound Iowa. We'll see. That's not going to be an easy task, but I think we will see some zone. I think we will see some different defenses. But I think as a whole, what they're going to have to do is just play strong man-to-man. Do not let other guys beat you, and try and contain Utah and make him a jump shooter. Now look, we've seen better players than Jared Utah come into Assembly Hall, get rattled, and blow it. And we've seen better players on Iowa in the past do that. So I think that the key for Indiana is just to ride the storm, figure it out, and attack, and be who they are on offense, and get to that rim. And hey, maybe you can get Utah from foul trouble. I mean, you never know what's going to happen, but the crowd has to be live. The people, those kids got to show up early, and they got to pack the place. It's going to be a gigantic game for this team. It's a season-changing game. You win that. If you go into Michigan State for a morning game on a Sunday and lose that, at least you can look back and say, hey, we just knocked off the number 5 team in the country. But if you lose to Penn State, you show up, play poorly against Iowa, and then you're heading up to East Lansing on a Sunday morning, you're not going to feel confident. And so that could be 3 really bad losses in a row. This season might hinge on Thursday's game. And I don't think I'm understating it by saying that. This is an enormous game, and everybody associated with Indiana, whether it's fans, whether it's us, whether it's whoever, has to bring their A game and play to that level.
Yep. And hey, it's time to bust out the "you rank 'em, we spank 'em" hashtag, because that has been one thing that Tom Crean teams have done well, is when ranked teams have come into Assembly Hall, we've played really, really well. When we've had good teams, even when we haven't had such good teams, they've seemed to play pretty well when the competition goes up in Assembly Hall. And look, Tom Crean teams a lot of times seem to play better as underdogs and struggle more as the lead dog, as they did tonight. We're the underdog against Michigan, come out, play really well. got that lead dog status tonight, struggled big time against Penn State. So, at some point you need to fix that, because the goal when you're at Indiana University is to play as a lead dog. But in this micro moment of Thursday night, we will be back in that underdog role, even at home. And so it's time to come out and play like that again. All right, we will get our picks and get last call here in just a second. I do want to offer one quick reminder to get on our email list. It's assemblycall.com/subscribe, or text Indiana, INDIANA, to 44144. Joining our free email list is really, other than listening to our live postgame show, the best way to connect with the show. We put a lot of time and effort into the analysis of those postgame emails, and we don't put them out anywhere. It's only to our subscribers. And when you reply to them, I reply right back. And I've had some great conversations with folks about the team in those email exchanges. So if you'd like to be part of that, join the email list. Your first email will be tomorrow morning, 6:30 Central Time. It will be there. And you may not want to relive this game and think too much about it, but I promise we'll have some insight in there for you that will make it worth it. So again, assemblycall.com/subscribe, or text INDIANA, Indiana, to 44144. Alrighty, we are wrapping up this episode of the Assembly Call. I am Jared Morris, here with Andy Bottoms, Ryan Phillips. The Hoosiers fall 68-63. The toe stub loss that we have all been fearing finally happened, and now it sets up a very, very, very important game for Indiana Thursday night at home against Iowa. Ryan has pretty much just laid down the gauntlet and called it a near must-win game when you consider what's coming after it with Michigan State and then all the tough games to follow. It could be a huge season-changing game for Indiana. So the question now is, who's going to win this game? Ryan, we'll go to you first. Does Indiana win this quasi-must-win game against Iowa?
Call me crazy, but I think they do. I think it's going to be about a 5-point win, maybe 10. And I think it's all going to come via it's going to come early, and I think that Iowa's going to make a charge late. But I got to pick Indiana. You're right about you rank them, we spank them. This team plays, traditionally, I'm not speaking this year specifically, but this team plays well when it's the underdog, when highly ranked teams come in. I expect them to have a very long week after this. And the fact that it's Thursday and it's not a quick turnaround on Tuesday, I think really helps Indiana. And I think it's going to be a really long week of film and practice. And I think that this team, with more time to prepare, has a really good shot to knock off Iowa. And I think Iowa is, at this point, I think that Iowa's riding pretty high and is ready for someone to come and take him out.
Andy, who are you picking?
Well, IU's men's and women's teams are both undefeated at home this week, and the IU women's team had a huge comeback against Iowa at home. I think it was actually on this past Thursday night. So I don't see any reason not to pick IU, other than the fact that I watched this game tonight. But even so, I'm gonna still go with the Hoosiers. I think, again, weird college basketball season, seems like the exact kind of thing that would happen. The team loses a game on the road that makes you scratch your head, and they turn around and come back and play well at home. So I think at this point, regardless of the schedule and anything else, this team has shown the ability to play well at home, make shots. It's going to be a crazy atmosphere, I'm sure. So I like them to keep that undefeated home record and take care of Iowa on Thursday.
Yeah, I agree. I think Indiana's going to win this game on Thursday night. As I said, a part of me was actually more confident about Indiana's ability to do that than to come avoid the trap game tonight. And that happened. This happened. It's over. We all need to move forward from it. But I think Indiana's going to come out and play well. This is a team that has played to its competition, and that's not so good when you're on the road against Penn State, but it's a good thing when you're at home against Iowa. So, as A.J. Moye once said, this is not the University of Jesus Christ and the 12 disciples. This is Iowa, and they're good. And they have a really good player in Jared Utoff and a good, experienced core of guys. But this isn't just some super team. They're a beatable team. And I think in Assembly Hall, with it rocking and with what I expect to be a great effort and a focused effort from Indiana, I think the Hoosiers are going to be able to get it done. But talk is cheap, and what we say here on the show doesn't matter. All that matters is what the Hoosiers do on Thursday night. So we will see, and hopefully they prove us all right. All right, let's go to last call. Final thoughts before we put this Penn State loss behind us. Ryan, we will go to you first.
Man, that sucked. That's my thought. Look, these guys, they got to bounce back. This was, teams fall. They lose games they shouldn't. That sounds like a really bland excuse, but it happens to almost everybody every year. You will lose one game that you really regret losing. Now, look, Indiana has a couple of those this year, but I think that it's fair to say that since mid-December, this is a different season than the one that happened before that. I think that this team needs to regroup. I think the leaders need to step up and make sure that what happened tonight doesn't happen again. And I think that that's really the key moving forward. And look, they got a huge opportunity to shut a lot of people up on Thursday, and I think that is what their focus needs to be. This loss sucks. They're going to watch a lot of bad film on it the next couple days, but their focus needs to be that next level and Thursday night, and they need to play as well as they've played all season to make that win happen.
Yep. Andy, last call.
I mean, I think we've talked so much about resiliency of this team. I know I talked about it on Tuesday night and how they showed it in game against Michigan. And I think this is a chance to show it, between games because, as Ryan mentioned, this is a critical stretch. I mean, this could really – we've all looked ahead to the schedule and looked at these things. And Michigan was, kind of the first game that everybody looked at. But, I mean, when you get down to what these last handful of games are, this is a critical point for this team. They can't hang their heads about this loss. As disappointing as it was, as much as we can lament the effort and different things like that, that can't linger because it's going to be really easy for this to get into a tailspin if that does happen. Now, again, I think I've been impressed with how this team has bounced back from disappointment and issues over the course of the season. Again, regardless of the schedule, I think they've shown that they can bounce back from some of these things. But I will definitely say that after a game like this, it would be easy for things to snowball in a direction that none of us want to see it go. And so I think perhaps the ultimate test of that resiliency is going to come on Thursday night. So I definitely think they'll be ready. I think there'll be a lot more energy, a lot more excitement than maybe there was to stroll into Happy Valley tonight. And while that's unfortunate, and we can all talk about how much we're disappointed in the way the performance went, and I still go back to you do get what you deserve, and I think the way that they played the majority of this game, they did get what they deserved tonight. But all is not lost. This is not, this loss doesn't undo any good that came from the run that they've had. This doesn't undo the way that they played on Tuesday night, but it certainly puts some extra emphasis on the game on Thursday, and I'm hopeful that the team responds.
Yeah, I am too, and I think we all seem confident that the team will respond well, and that's the thing. Again, tonight's loss, terrible, awful, inexcusable in a lot of ways, but look, again, we kind of saw it coming. It's been a crazy year for college basketball. It tells us that, maybe this team isn't quite as ironclad, protected from the toe stub loss as we thought, and now there it is sitting on our schedule, on our results forever. But I'm not ready to do a complete 180 and now say that I've stopped believing in this team, that I don't think this team still can be resilient and come back. I still like, the core of leaders that we have and what they've shown over the course of Big Ten play, even if that didn't come out tonight. So I think if Indiana comes out Thursday night, puts up another bad effort, just seems kind of out of sync like they were tonight, then I think it'll be time to start sounding the alarm bells. But we're one game removed from that 28-0 run over Michigan that had everybody, thinking, hey, this really is a Final Four team. And now, of course, you go and lose to Penn State, and all the old bad negative feelings come back. And that's natural. That's what's going to happen. I don't think you can argue with anybody for kind of feeling that way, but it does. It sets up Thursday night to be a huge moment for the rest of the season. How does Indiana come back? If they come out, if they play well, if they get that win Thursday night, I think now you can look at the rest of that schedule and say, okay, let's go, let's attack this. We got this. If not, then maybe some of those questions come up. But we will wait until after that game to address any of that, because for the most part in Big Ten play this year, the Hoosiers have done a good job, and they've played tough, and they've been resilient. It didn't happen tonight, but that's one game out of 18. So the big key for Indiana now is that sometimes these things have snowballed in February, and that's been everybody's fear. And now here we sit on the cusp of the toughest games on the schedule, and the Hoosiers really have to guard against that. And that's going to be up to the leaders. As important as, the performance of OG Anunoby is, and how much we want to see Juwan Morgan, get some more playing time, and how important Thomas Bryant is this season, and playing well in these big games and rebounding from a game like tonight is up to the leaders. So it's on Yogi and Nick Zeisloft and Max Bielfeldt and those guys to really make sure that they are providing that good leadership and make sure that this doesn't spiral in the wrong direction. I still have confidence and faith that will happen, but again, talk is cheap. We will find out Thursday night. And once that game is over, we will be here with another episode of the Assembly Call to break it all down. Hopefully it is a victorious one, because we need something to wash the nasty taste of tonight's game out of our mouths, and hopefully we get that Thursday night. We will talk to you then, everybody. Enjoy the rest of your weekend. Enjoy the Super Bowl. Have a good week. And we'll talk to you after Thursday night's IU-Iowa game. Talk to you then, everybody.